We have another huge NHL trade to discuss. This time we have a multiplayer deal between the Boston Bruins and the Washington Capitals. We'll discuss the details coming up next. Well, welcome back to another video here, Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have another substantial NHL trade involving two Eastern Conference teams. We've seen, of course, teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs make some big moves, and now the Boston Bruins are basically responding and adding their version of that to their roster here tonight. They made a big trade with the Washington Capitals. So the Washington Capitals are sending defenseman Dmitri Orlov and forward Jerard Hatheway to the Boston Bruins. That's a pretty good ad for Boston. They're getting a big, rough, physical forward, and they're getting a really good puck-moving defenseman. They already have some pretty solid, good puck-moving defensemen back there. They're going to be even more nasty on both the back end and the bottom six now. Of course, they have a lot of talent now. The other good part about this is both players are pending UFA, so this is basically expected to be rental players. I guess there's a possibility maybe Hathaway resigns, but Orlov most likely doesn't. I can't imagine they'll squeeze him into their cap. Dmitri Orlov is also traded with this about 50% retained, so they're getting Dmitri Orlov at $2.5 million. So 2.55 is what it works out to. Hathaway's making 1.5, so that's just over $4 million going on to the Bruins salary cap. Going back the other way to the Washington Capitals is forward Craig Smith. He earns $3.1 million, so it's just a hair under $1 million that the Bruins are increasing their cap by, which they can squeeze in here with what they had available to them. They're also sending 3 draft picks, including their first-round pick in the 2023 NHL draft, so the draft coming up this summer. They also are sending a second-round pick a few years down the road in 2025 and a third-round pick in 2024. So all in all, the Capitals get 3 pretty good draft picks, including a first-rounder this year. They also get a player in Craig Smith who's going to be there for the rest of the year and will be done. Essentially, I don't expect them to re-sign Craig Smith, but obviously he's been kind of falling in a favor in Boston and trying to move that contract for some time. For them to be able to do that, give up those picks, as well as get a couple of players like Orlov and Hathaway into the mix, to me was a phenomenal deal for Boston. What does this signal for Washington? Certainly, selling off some pending UFAs. I know they're in the mix for playoffs. It's not a given that they're going to miss, but they're kind of becoming sellers at this point and getting some draft currency for future. So I wonder what else we will see out of this team, or I don't really expect them to go into a full-fledged rebuild. That's not something we'll ever see as long as Alex Ovechkin is playing, who's making his return to the team here as well after taking some time away due to the loss of his father. But at the same time, it's it's change that we did not necessarily expect to see within the Caps. Part of this driven as well as Orlov was a pending UFA, as I mentioned, the same with Hathaway. They negotiated with Orlov. They were interested in keeping him. Apparently, he was looking for a 6-year contract, is what's rumored. But they only wanted to offer him 3 years. They didn't get too far in negotiations. They knew that it wasn't going to come to be, and they decided to make a trade. You also have to wonder what happens next with the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Gavrikov deal. This has been rumored to be in place with the Bruins for a number of days now, but we knew there was something holding it up, and maybe it was that the Bruins needed to unload other money, like Craig Smith, for example. Maybe Columbus didn't want to take any of that back, so they had other things to figure out. And it sounded like everything out of Columbus was that they have a deal in place. It sounded like it was with Boston, and they were just waiting for another move, and I think this kind of cancels that out now. So where's Gavrikov going to go? Doesn't look like it's going to be Boston after all. They've got their defensemen. They've got their depth forward. I think Boston's in pretty good shape here so far. So let me know your thoughts on this trade down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.